Wonderful. Great, Mark Cannella, UVM Extension. I see a lot of familiar faces on the participant list. So for those of you that don't know me, I oversee our statewide extension business programming and have been involved in Maple business programming and Maple business applied research over the past several years. I'm going to talk to you about modern Maple management and economics, and kind of we'll save us as we go along, but I think Mark showed that great picture at the end and kind of this concept of iconic imagery or nostalgia for how we understand things. There's nothing wrong with that, but we recognize that as the maple industry has developed, things are changing and our expectations and our outlook changes as well. So I think that's kind of a theme moving forward into this concept of management and economics. So I'd like to start by asking you all to maybe make a contribution, and you can either do it internally, make a note for yourself, but I would welcome you to try the chat window and share with us what your first experience was with maple syrup. Did you have an experience with syrup as a food, or with maple sap from trees, or with maple forests? I know for me, it was as a grade school student in central New York. We had a local nature center had an educator that came out to our school, and we had a nice hardwood forest, and we would have the trees, 1 or 2 buckets would go up every year. And I just remember how exciting it was to see what I call tree food, food coming from trees, and to see that interaction between the humans and the plant world. So I'm going to try to figure out how to navigate to get the chat window open so I can see it, and encourage you all to make a couple notes here, and let's kind of see what pops up for people. There you go. People actually sugaring as a kid. Sugar on snow. All right. Backyard sugaring. That sounds like bringing it from sap all the way to syrup. So there you go. Full circle there. And I didn't grow up in Vermont. I was drinking sap from New York State trees here. And but I mention this because I know some people are new to the state, and they'll come in and they'll maybe be familiar with the food of maple, but they don't really understand the process or some of the cultural background. And I just want to start off by saying there's a rich cultural history to Vermont that's certainly still evolving and being written today. And as I shift gears and start talking about business and finance, I don't want it to be exclusive. I don't think there's culture and food over here and then business and finance over here. I see it all as this kind of big, this big beautiful art project, and it's the people's values and visions that they bring into the economy that I think has a huge influence on where it goes and how it develops and what we're happy with, or the features that we seek to see changing. Just a quick thing, joke, the picture on the far right bottom there, Johnson Woolen Mills. When I think of sugaring, I think of this pile of wool clothing at a conference a couple of years ago. I took a picture of how many people showed up with the same jackets. Pretty classic Vermonter forest wear. All right, thanks everyone. Keep those chats going. I'm going to move on and definitely check them out for those that haven't seen them. Let's look at the maple economy overview here. Global production, predominantly or exclusively in the U.S. and Canada. 75% of the global crop is produced in Canada. 25% of the global crop is produced in the U.S. That 75% that's from Canada, 90% or more of that, I think maybe even 95%, is from the province of Quebec. And then the pie from the US, the 25% of the global crop from the US, over 50% of that crop is coming from the small state of Vermont. We lead the United States in syrup production by far compared to other states. Now looking at the bottom right, you can see a nice statistical graph here. We've seen rapid growth in Vermont maple production in the past 20 years, starting around the early 2000s. And then in 2008 to 2010, there was a shortage of syrup. There was a couple poor crop years, and the prices surged dramatically. And that happened at the same time that I think education about technology and producer adoption of technology increased dramatically as well. So we went from a lower price perspective and people not really having access or using technology to high prices, major investment and adoption in technology that allowed sugar makers to spend less time in the enterprise to enhance yields and the amount of syrup and the quality of syrup coming from trees. And all these things really fostered this environment of, wow, maple is not just a great hobby or lifestyle, but can actually be a pretty significant business and potentially a profitable business. So you can see that trajectory of growth. The yellow line on top is United States total production based on our statistics. And the green line is the Vermont portion of that. And you can see that growth from 2006 to 2020 pretty dramatically. Note that it's also leveled out a little bit, about 2017, 18. We're not quite sure that we're seeing the same growth that we saw over the prior 10 years. Looking at just general farm gate sales, this would be the amount of money that's estimated to go directly to producers of maple syrup. In the United States, it's estimated at around $130 million a year. And for the state of Vermont, estimated just shy of 60 million. Again, about half of the US crop and about half of the value of the crop at the farm gate. I think it's important to note it's a small industry developing, and a lot of the industry leaders that have awareness of the local dynamics do think that the statistics are somewhat underreported. And I think most people will assume that the actual economic activity is a bit larger or higher than what's actually demonstrated in the statistics, but it's tough to know exactly how much more. Okay, thinking about the land base a little bit, in acreage, the general estimation, maple production, about 110,000 acres of forested land here in Vermont. To do a quick comparison, we estimate around 600,000, I wrote down 590,000 acres of open cropland in Vermont. So you could see maybe 20% a comparison between maple production and open cropland. This isn't accounting for all the forests in Vermont, predominantly a forested state, but an estimate from most recent research is about 10% of the maple forests in Vermont are currently being tapped for sap. Doesn't mean the other 90% are accessible or maybe even appropriate based on age class, but it does indicate that we're still much lower in the resource utilization than maybe we could be if we expect more growth. And then I want to tip my hat to job production. This is a modeling project at a Center for Rural Studies a few years back, estimated about 3,000 full-time equivalents in the maple economy. And that's not just maple producers. It includes both full and part-time maple producers, and then it also includes the related industries, manufacturing, processing, distribution, and sales of specifically maple products. So we started a really big view. Now we're going to start to bring it down a little regionally. Mark indicated we did a Northeast producer survey in 2019. I'm going to share a little bit of that information. We're going to estimate about 5,000 maple producers in the Northeast states. Most of the US syrup is coming from Vermont, plus a couple other Northeast states. Of those 5,000 producers estimated, many or most of them are going to be hobby or what I'll call micro commercial enterprise, even under 500 taps. Thinking about the syrup crop, the majority of the crop from our survey, we found about 80%, it's produced by a small number of commercial producers with 5,000 taps or more. Looking over at this donut chart on the right, I'm going to walk you through. First, looking at that outer ring, the orange and the blue. The outside ring is the total crop. So you can see the orange component is the enterprises with 5,000 taps or more. And then the blue is the less than 5,000 taps. And there you go. You can see that 81% of the total crop in 2019 covered by this particular survey came from the 5,000 tap or more group. But then by number, the inner ring is the number of producers. So 312 producers in this survey, 18% of them were 5,000 taps or more, compared to 82%, which is that larger number of people that produce a smaller amount of syrup. I'm not going to tell you that big or small is good or bad, but I do think this has relevance to concepts of representation in the industry. The number of producers is not necessarily reflective of the amount of crop that's moving through the system or the amount of jobs or the amount of financial magnitude of the businesses. So I think this is an important feature, and we hear murmurings of this even in the producer associations, kind of looking at their membership demographics, new versus old producers, large versus small. So I think this concept of crop distribution and producer numbers certainly will have relevance as the industry matures and starts to make broader decisions about how it wants to develop. Now we're going to bring this even one step closer now, looking at Vermont, talk about just some basic factors within the Vermont maple economy. First and foremost, I think brand recognition and the community experience in tourism is really important. I mean, maple is quintessential Vermont, and Vermont is quintessential maple. And this isn't necessarily just by luck. There was strategic policy and marketing promotion campaigns going well back into the 1800s, even going back to standardization of density and flavor grades that were, policy and government instruments that were institutionalized to identify Vermont. And when we still hold that true. So Pure Vermont Maple, festivals, open houses, this is a real important part of the economy, and definitely want to recognize that cultural experience. Now, looking a little bit at the different built infrastructure, it's important to note that technology innovation and research is still occurring in Vermont, and manufacturing is occurring in Vermont. I put Leader Evaporator in the graphic, one of the long-standing companies among many more that have developed and built and sold units, not just for Vermont, but across the US and Canada. And then technology is still evolving. Mark's worked for years at the Proctor Maple Research Center, and they've not only developed best practices, but they've actually pioneered and patented new technologies that get utilized across sugaring enterprises in the country. It's also important to note the major distributors. Butternut Mountain Farm is the iconic one that's been active and the largest probably in the country. We're seeing a number of smaller packing and selling companies that are certainly present and continue to grow in Vermont. So this concept of being able to have the packaging and distribution infrastructure where a producer can produce high quality bulk syrup, and whether they have the capacity or the interest to market it, they decide they're going to pass it on to a company that's going to move and promote this syrup nationally to other audiences. That's a key feature of the maple economy that the other states don't necessarily have, or don't have at the scale that we have here in Vermont. Now I'm going to move a little bit to our programs here. As a farm business educator, I think about the educational outcomes that we're trying to promote. We're certainly trying to enhance producer livelihood and really support business objectives at the owner level, no matter what those objectives may be. And then we're actively pursuing applied research projects at Extension, and really the obvious outcome there is we want to inform public development initiatives and policy. I also want to be able to put research out there that's relevant to private firms and helping them consider how they want to position and move forward with their private business decisions. So a couple ways we're doing that. Mark and I both mentioned the survey now. When you ask about business viability, we ask about what works for people and why are they viable, or where are their constraints. In this survey, we ask people, are they economically viable? Ask the maple business owners across the Northeast. And I think this is one of the first times we've got some really solid data to show, wow, viability is not universal across scales in this situation. Looking at the bar on the left, you see all responses of the 312 participants. Maybe about 20–25% say they're economically viable. If we look at just the subset of 5,000 taps and above, now we've got 60% of those participants say they're economically viable, and almost holding the same line if we look at an even smaller group of people that are over 10,000 taps, holding close to 60% saying they're economically viable. So what does this mean about the all responses, only the 22% that are viable? That means that roughly 80% of that population of smaller operators are either A, vulnerable, demonstrating they're actually economically vulnerable, or they're saying they're sustainable. And they're sustainable based on two things from our survey. They're sustainable based on either built up equity and wealth. They've got money in the bank that they can utilize either for the enterprise or for their household because the enterprise isn't generating it, or they have other jobs. The enterprise is not covering all its costs and generating a profit. So the participants are relying on other income to enable them to sustain the maple. And they think they can sustain it, but I think from an economic development perspective, we have to acknowledge that there have to be other job opportunities in Vermont that enable them to sustain these enterprises. Looking at a different type of work, this is not a social science survey at all. This would be our benchmarking program. I get really excited about benchmarking. This is really where I think as an extension programmer, you can see research and education really hybridize, and it's pretty awesome to be a part of it. In a benchmarking program, we've got an educator or an advisor that meets directly with a cooperator, or in this case, a business owner. They develop a relationship, and we do financial benchmarking. We work with producers directly on their records. We provide educational support. We help them clean their records. We find errors. We teach them about how to understand financial statements. At the same time, we're developing a pretty robust financial analysis result that the participant can take on their own, but then we also can distill it for research and teaching. So I can show you this table over here on the right-hand side as a research output, because it doesn't tell you who the producer is. And I'll do that in a second, but the business owner is going to get a detailed report and the consultation that goes with that for them to make their own private firm-based decisions, as I'll call them, that's really going to be driving the economy forward decision by decision. So here's what we do. Over at the right-hand side, we did financial work with a producer when the bulk prices were at around $2.40 a pound. And we broke down their sales and their expenses. And you can see those green bars over on the right-hand side. You can see, in this case, the owner was saying, I'm actually able to draw the salary that I need out of this business. I'm drawing $38,000 out of this business. It's a seasonal maple operation. 38 was a good number for him. And there was a small profit left over for reinvestment and to cover the inherent risk in running a business. So we did that 1 year, and then 2 years later, we did the same analysis when the market prices were at $2.05 a pound. And look what we see. The sales changed, the expense profile is kind of the same, but those bars over on the right are no longer green. Now we can see an owner that's no longer able to meet their goals or their expectation for the salary, the job they need from their business. There's no longer any profit cushion there for reinvestment or risk. And this is a case of a discrete analysis we did with a producer to look at their business and to make their business management decisions. We can use the same type of analysis for forecasting and modeling if we wanted to get into economic development outlook at a broader, regional or policy level. So there's an overview of benchmarking. Another different program track that Mark and I are on, and I got to say, any photos, I think I did finally put photo credit to Mark Iselhart on the cover of this presentation. I like partnering with Mark because he's the brains and he's also the photo library between most of our programs here. So thanks, Mark, for all the pictures. So this MapleManager.org is our new website, and we're really getting some great traction nationally, putting out resources for business owners. Again, these are tools, things for them to analyze their business, test scenarios, do their business planning, but also for forest land owners and forest land managers. And the real essence of this project is really kind of stepping away from that maybe nostalgic mindset that a farm or maple enterprise is constrained by the owned acreage and the capacity of a single owner. We're really looking at business-to-business relationships and partnerships. So in this project, we're advancing a whole host of legal templates and instruments to help people navigate partnership development, corporate development, LLCs, joint ventures, things of that nature, where multiple parties can get together. We're also looking at leases, so people with land can interface with people that don't have land, but perhaps have the skills to turn the maple resource into an active business. And the next step that we'll be developing over the next couple of months is actually buy and sell contracts, purchasing contracts and relationship contracts, a different way for two parties to work together towards the same end of advanced maple development and expansion of maple production. To close out, can I give you a bit of an outlook on some of the ongoing and the new research, not just from me, but from other parties. Market demand research is on the rise. It's something we're seeing more and more. The Vermont Agency of Agriculture has recently published a couple reports both on domestic demand and also doing some demand research on Australia and South Korea most recently. Other states nearby are also going to be doing this work. And I think, that's my good timer there. I think it's important to note that this is a trend that basically in the maple region, we know that it's becoming very competitive with the expansion. And most of not just the industry distributors, but also the owner operators are realizing they need to advance kind of an outer marketing plan, getting maple out of the maple region to other parts of the US where customers are excited about it. So we're excited to see new research, and there's a need for more research on all these different features and more, like flavor and grades, packaging, price, third-party verifications, and then that tough to measure concept of environmental impact or ecosystem services, trying to understand not just does the customer have interest in it, but does their interest resonate with the willingness to pay for a product or the willingness to pay a premium for the product. So you'll be seeing more market research. I'm hoping to do some of it, grants pending, but it's coming from other states as well. And then the last thing that's very interesting to me is this concept of specialty crop governance and policy. I mentioned a little bit about producer associations. The dynamic of the membership of those associations are changing quite a bit with the modern maple enterprises, and not everyone's signing up to join maple associations anymore. But these associations are really pivotal in marketing and lobbying initiatives, both to promote syrup to consumers, but also to navigate the development of the industry with regulations and standards in the US and internationally as well. So I'm pretty excited about this concept of origin-based products, the where it comes from, but also the nuance of a product that only can come from a certain region. So that's something that I'll be looking into. And just a couple examples here: Puerto Rican coffee, Oregon hazelnuts, and then we've got the Maple Syrup Producers Association in Quebec. Different strategies that different specialty crops are using to fund research, to possibly manage markets. In the case of Quebec syrup and also Oregon hazelnuts, they actually have cooperative boards, and they have supply management programs that are matched with their marketing programs as well. So these are really these are new avenues for me, but I think these are things that we're going to see more talk about, and hopefully more research as this industry matures. They're going to have more complicated decisions to make about how it will go forward. I'm going to stop there, and I think we've got ample time for Q&A.